Hey guys, Shay Baker here. Episode 2 of Predicting Patterns. We're going to be looking at Toho and the Kissimmee Chain again, Lake Kissimmee, Hatch and Haw, Cypress, and Tiger Lake. It's pretty weird. The first two of these we're going to do are going to both be on this chain, but MLF just had their Bass Pro Tour. Jordan Lee, congrats, old partner of mine from back in the college days. Got the first win ever in the Bass Pro Tour, which is unbelievable. Another epic win for him. But FLW Tour is actually headed back to the Kissimmee Chain. They're down there practicing right now, so we're going to look at how last week's tournament with the Bass Pro Tour compares to this week and what we expect. And I got a special guest. This guy actually taught me a lot of what I know about punching. And it's a buddy of mine I met. He was fishing the Bass Pro Shops Open down on Toho, and the final day, he and another guy named Daniel Lanier tied. And most of the crew had to go home. I was working the tournament, so I actually jumped in the boat with him, and another rider jumped in the boat with the other guy. We were their marshals for the tie-breaking fish off the next day. So that's how I got to meet this guy. And without further ado, I'm going to bring him in, Mr. Rich Howes, the 2013 Lake Toho Bassmaster Open Champion. How are you doing, Rich?
I'm good. How you doing, Mr. Baker?
Doing
Always
good.
to hear you and see you.
Hey. Pretty cool. Technology, right?
That's right.
So, that tournament you won, that Open, it was a couple weeks earlier than this, wasn't it?
No, actually, well, I don't know if they do the Super Bowl at the same exact date every time, but that fish off, we went out for 4 hours on Super Bowl Sunday.
Really? Well,
Super Bowl Sunday, so I guess it would be right about this time where it spills from January to February.
and really this time of year, so much is dependent on weather anyway, right? So even if it was a week or two different, what we're seeing is, last week we talked a lot, Trevor Fitzgerald and I did one for the Bass Pro Tour. We talked a lot about lipless crankbaits, jerk baits, chatterbaits, which I have one of those somewhere. And we saw a ton of these things play.
Yep.
Most significantly, I believe, was the jerkbait. Really, Randy Howe, he was catching a bunch of fish. Anthony Agliardi in his round catching a bunch of fish. So these baits played huge on Toho. But correct me if I'm wrong, do you not believe, based on what I'm about to pull up here, which is the Kissimmee, Florida 10-day forecast?
Yeah, I just looked at it.
It's about to explode.
It's going to get nasty.
The new moon is tomorrow. Day one of the tournament is 2 or 3 days after that. I guess Thursday. I mean, how bad? I'm pretty sure we're in the same boat. How bad do you wish you were fishing this tournament?
Well, I love fishing tournaments, so I'll do it at any point. But that whole chain has got to be bursting at the seams. You know, we've had 2 solid weeks of cold. You know, cold front after cold front, and it's been on a little warming trend for 2 or 3 days now, and it's going to be even, talking 80-degree weather during their practice leading up to the event. Day one, we could see some really special bags of fish and individual fish. It could be just out of sight.
It's amazing. Like, looking at this, you could not have asked, and it never happens in Florida for a tournament. But when you have 17 tournaments in a row or whatever they've had down there, I mean, you're going to end up having it. But basically today it was 76, tomorrow 71, 74, 77, 80, 81, 82, 76, 79 through the tournament. Only chance of rain is on the final day of the tournament right now. 10% chance, mostly sunny every day. I mean, this is epic. Sight fishing, right?
It's setting up to, be one of those Dean Rojas type of moments from years ago. It is just absolutely perfect. And I can tell you the reason that weather's set up like that is because I am not in the
right.
tournament.
Same here. Yeah. We saved our money on this one. That was a good move. But so the big key too is those lows not dropping. I mean, it's staying 59, 61, 61, 65 Saturday night. And that's so big in Florida. But two, having that sun to warm the water up. So sight fishing is the obvious thing I think everybody's going to be looking for. But you know how it is down there in Florida. You can search for these glory holes where there's 5 monsters that come up, or a group of even more than that come up into these little areas. So sight fishing is a really big thing that we'll play here. But don't you think that just mainly being able to kind of aggressively fish for some of these fish that are moving up is going to be one of those deals while you're searching for these sight fishing areas? You're just going to be kind of on the prowl and search bait fishing too?
Oh, absolutely. Because, there'll be plenty of fish moved up shallow, figuring out who they want to spawn with and, fish introductions, I guess. Ladies' night at the pad field.
Yeah.
But, you had asked about a couple baits, and this is like Florida one-on-one, and it's just the speed worm, So the speed worm is it's just like the ultimate Florida search bait, especially when the water's warming. The big size speed worm. When it's cold, I'll throw the little one a lot. But as you're looking for where the fish have really pushed in, you're just casting the speed worm, and any one of those casts could be a 10-pounder.
We saw Jordan Lee today, and they were actually fishing Lake Garcia. That's a little ways away, but latitude, longitude, whatever wise, it's pretty much the same weather. It's only like an hour from Kissimmee. So you saw him today. He won again, and he was throwing that speed worm or some worm like that, a reeling worm, and mixing in a chatterbait. And I think from last week to this week, the chatterbait will probably be the biggest thing that played both weeks versus like a jerkbait and rattle trap. I just don't see the guys really giving it a go for the win. But like when you get up in that 2 foot, 3 foot deep, maybe even a foot with a chatterbait, and it gives you something that's just a little bit below the surface. And I think they'll mix in too, like those skinny dippers and paddle tail, weightless swim baits.
Any type of little swimming, worm, dipper, gambler, big easy, things like that are going to be awesome. And as you know, and as a lot of as the folks watching know, the chatterbait triggers some big bites. There's something about that bait that really attracts a bigger bite. The great thing about the speed worm is it catches all sizes,
right? And
you can fish it so many different ways. You can buzz this across flat pads and get topwater bites. You can swim it in the middle of the column. You can fish it like just an old school Texas worm. And the thing that's going to play this week is swimming it and killing it next to pads where they like to spawn. So that's one of my favorite things to do this time of year is to swim this thing around, and you come up on that isolated, clump of pads sitting out there by itself, and you fire a speed worm over it, swim it to it, kill it, and then your line takes off.
One other thing that we mentioned last week, and I was actually surprised to see, based on the MLF format of every fish counts, I was surprised to see so many guys stick their guns like Hackney and Ish punching. I mean, it's obvious. You go to Florida, it's a big deal, but we were worried. And I've got the punch rod in here. This is one other thing we talked about last week that we thought, there it is.
I never leave without my cricket.
Yeah. I got the old D-bomb on, but down in Florida, the cricket, that is something interesting to talk about. Either a baby D-bomb or a cricket a lot of time is better. But I think, too, that's when it's kind of those cold front conditions. So right now, you can probably flip a brick in there and they'll knock the fire out of it. So that's one of the things that even in that format of you can catch 51-pounders and be just as good as 5, 10-pounders, you still saw enough people go around punching. So I think that those two things, a chatterbait and punching, are still going to play pretty big. The winner will probably sight fish. I mean, the winner will have this mega hole found, but I think you'll see some of that other in the top 10. The only other thing that I like to do, I got a little video I'm going to pull up, but the only other thing I really like to do this time of year when the fish are coming and going, and we talked about this a little bit last week, is flip that big jig. And y'all have a big jig. This is one before y'all came out with it with Fitzgerald Fishing, but flipping that big jig, this is a video of Lake Toho kind of down near the lock, and flipping it in these reeds when these fish are coming and going from and to the spawn. When they're aggressive in these warm temperatures, it can be a big producer too real quick. So I think that might play some. But it's a big Okeechobee thing, and there just doesn't seem to be quite as much of that kind of cover, or it doesn't produce quite as much on the Kissimmee Chain as it does on Okeechobee. But still, I think that's another thing that you could see. I mean, basically, fishing in Florida in 80-degree weather in the spring, there's really nothing you can do wrong. You can catch them doing anything. It's how do you catch the biggest 5 you can catch. And
and that jig, the jig will play. You're right. It's flipping reed heads down in Okeechobee is probably more popular, with that technique. But we do have some reed clumps like you found down there by Southport. And we have a Texas jig that we call it with Fitzgerald fishing that we use. And a lot of times it's pretty cool because a lot of times we'll take the skirt off and you'll kind of fish it naked with just like a beaver type bait. So you don't even have the skirt, and then we flip the pencil reeds and so forth. The jig bite for Kissimmee really gets going, around April, May, June on the outside Kissimmee grass, a big time. But the pads are going to be a bigger player this week on that chain specifically than the pencil reeds.
I just pulled up a little the map, the Anglr app map, to drop a waypoint where I caught that fish, or pretty close to where I caught that fish, and the reed clumps.
Mm-hmm.
And I got it pulled up right now. This is where Trevor and we actually thought somewhere we saw that MLF was going to be confined to Toho, I thought, but they opened it up to the whole chain, and it may have been the plan all along. But we kind of broke down Toho. I left a few waypoints up here. One of them's Goblet's Bay or Goblet's Cove, and we saw that play in the Bass Pro Tour. And then you got the south end
jerk bait place.
Yeah, and I think that with this weather, you might see a lot more punching and sight fishing in there, don't you think?
Sight fishing and goblets.
Goblets is the one that goes up there into East Toho's Canal, right?
Yeah, you can go up that canal and that whole north bank of Goblets. I hadn't been in there in a while, but it's pretty popular spawning ground.
Yeah.
Steer Beach, North and South Steer Beach will be another place. Kind of out Red's Fish Camp. There's always a famous shell bar that Swindle got on outside of that years ago, but inside along that Steer Beach. And then you kind of go around a point and up into that round part where Whaley's is, and that will be just loaded with spawning fish.
So what about, Big Grassy Island? That's another place we talked about some. I believe that's where you caught some of your fish in that open win up around there, didn't you?
I caught a really key fish the final day. When I came in on day 3, I only had 4 fish. And I had about 5 minutes to go, and I went to Little Grassy, which is the first little island right by the ramp, and I caught a 4.5 pounder that ultimately got me in the tie and allowed me the chance to win it for that moment. But I think I saw some of the MLF stuff this week. I believe Fletcher Shryock did a lot of pitch and reed heads and whatnot on Big Grassy. And I saw another person in there, and I can't remember who it was. But it's a popular place. It's got good spawning ground. It sticks out in the middle of the lake a lot, so it attracts. It's coming and going at all times.
So I'm looking at the app now, and moving down to, I believe this first lake is Cypress, correct? Yeah, Cypress. Yeah. Do you think that'll play much this week?
It very well could. It's usually a little bit better later in the year. So Cypress is kind of a shallow bowl. And while we still are getting a lot of cold fronts and the wind pushes up, that lake stays pretty muddy for the first January and February type of thing. With this weather clearing up like it is, we've had some rain, so it's probably been flushed a little bit. So if that water's clear enough in there, it very well could be a tremendous factor.
So just looking at it kind of on the satellite imagery, is it this north end? Do you just fish the end based on the last couple of days of wind, or how do you kind of pick where you go in here to look?
Yeah, so traditionally that north bank, like many times, all the fronts that come through blowing out of the north, that's usually the cleanest water. When we get into March is when you might find the spawners all around the lake after the north winds have stopped pounding it. But yeah, the water should be cleaner. It basically from the canal that dumps you into Cypress over towards where you would take the canal to go to Hatchin Hall. That whole section is kind of famous for, it's got some eelgrass, out there, and there's been some really big bags caught out of there.
Well, I just pulled up the wind. You can actually overlay wind on this app. I just pulled up the wind, and right now the wind's blowing out of the west. It looks like 13 to 19 based on 3 gauges they have out there. So that bank you're talking about, kind of that west shore, is setting up pretty right now based on that, which the wind can change direction, but we don't have a lot of weather change coming. It doesn't look like. I mean, it looks like it's about to stabilize.
That's the key thing. Fish, the Florida fish is all about stability, temperature and whatnot. But, even when it's cold, if it's cold consistent, they bite. You know what I mean? It's the big swings that shut them down. But, there were some pretty darn good weights, like at the Harris Chain. The guy Whitney Stevens, I think, who won it. That was all pre-spawn. It wasn't a spawning deal, but it was cold. But it had been cold for a while and was cold for a while, and you could get them to bite.
It seems like those fish in Florida move based on the weather. So if it is cold for a day, they move out, but they don't all move out and group back up. And if it's warm for a day, they move up, but they don't all move up and group back up. So you end up with all this transition going on versus, like you said, if it's cold for a week, they get to all group up out, and you can catch them. And they just like the weather being stable. They get more aggressive, even though it's cold, if it's been cold and more consistent, like you're saying. So looking at this West Shore, would you go back in behind these clumps, behind these little islands, or fish out? Looks like that eelgrass comes out a pretty good way, especially on the north side of that shore.
Yeah, that whole shore, that whole north side of Cypress, the northwest quadrant, which we were talking about, traditionally has some eelgrass that goes out, 50, 60, 75 yards out into the lake, and it's shallow there, and they do a lot of spawning there. And then if you just go to the middle of the lake, middle north to northeast section, there's a lot of pencil reeds. There's like an entire pencil reed line, and they'll get up in there. There'll be some eelgrass clumps out there, and then some places you can actually get behind that reed line, and there'll be plenty of spawners in there too.
So that's kind of where you think the spawning will happen, is mostly behind that harder reed line?
Yeah.
Just marking a waypoint and putting, we like to call them pattern points. It's a little better terminology, and it's really what we're talking about doing here is building patterns and just trying to kind of predict what's going to happen in this deal. So kind of between the canals and then above, like if you came out of that first canal and hung a left and went back up that bank, some of those areas really are what you're talking about.
Absolutely.
So moving down, I think Hatchinahaw is next, right?
Yes, sir.
All right, so you come into Hatchinahaw, and I mean, let's just go ahead and be real. 70% of the top 10 are going to come out of Kissimmee, probably. You think traditionally?
Yeah.
I mean, so we're kind of splitting hairs now, but we want to see just moving down the chain, what might play in these other lakes. And we'll get to Kissimmee in a minute, because I know that's my boy's favorite little fishing hole anyway. But
so Hatchin again, it has a good portion of the lake surrounded by pencil reeds. Hatchin Hall to me is kind of divided into two sections, because you got the one section that everybody drives through going from Cypress to Kissimmee, and there's some good spots in there. Like as soon as you go into Hatchin Hall, there's a big cove off to the right with lily pads and some bulrush and whatnot. Can be a great place. But as you get towards the Kissimmee River, as if you were heading to Kissimmee, you could bang a right, and that's where most of the lake actually is. There's, 8-9 miles north of that. And up there's a lot of pencil reeds, some pepper grass that get in there. And those are the fish that come and go quickly. That's actually kind of similar to Okeechobee. Okeechobee's notorious for, I found females all over a reed patch one day, and the next day they're done and they're gone. But somebody who is fishing the moment, so to speak, and decides to go in there and hit some of those reed lines could really stumble across a great bag.
And again, since you have this strong wind out of the west, you look at maybe that west shore to try to get the protected reeds where they're not getting pounded by wind for 2 or 3 days.
Yeah, well, so most of the reed heads are going to be on the east shore of that section of the lake and all the way up to around the north. There's some on the west that's going to be there, but the reeds, it's not a super wide lake. So I think with just a little bit of calm, and then you can get in behind those reeds on that east side, that northeast side. And there's also some canals I believe in that upper northwest section of the lake.
I saw that. I was going to ask you about that. Do they use those to spawn like they do in a lot of Florida fisheries?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's a big deal there too. Maybe a player for a boat. I mean, you're not going to have 4 guys go in there and be able to top 10.
Yeah. That is somebody that sneaks away from the traditional stuff and puts together a banner day. In fact, I remember years ago in an FLW tournament there, one guy basically made the final day cut because of one day fishing in Hatch and Hall. And he caught an 11 pounder, 11 and a half pounder, and that fish carried him all the way to the finals. And he kept fishing Hatch and Hall. How do you leave that? But, like I said,
Runs out.
They're in and they're out there. And so he went from catching a 25-pound bag with an 11-pound anchor to catching 6 pounds.
Yeah. Yeah, that's brutal. And that's the difference, too. Like you hear everybody talk about it in Florida. You got resident fish and you've got lake fish or fish that are coming to you. And with this weather, there are going to be guys that find these areas with these fish that come in and they're kind of paled out. And it's very obvious that they're not from there. Even if they're under a mat, they'll be pale versus those resident fish. Like you catch that 11-pounder and it's black, there ain't a chance there's going to be another 11. Well, there's a chance, but it's a very small chance there's going to be another 11-pounder in that next mat or the mat tomorrow, right?
You're correct. If you get into that area, whether it's flipping or even casting the speed worm, and you're starting to catch fish that haven't colored up yet, that's typically a great sign that the fish are coming to you, and you can just sit there. Florida's a lot about finding a spot and grinding it. You don't just run around all over the place like a chicken with your head cut off. You just grind it.
Let's go ahead and move south of Hatch and Hall and down into, you actually hit Kissimmee next, but we're going to take a little aerial tour. We're going to come through Kissimmee just a little bit, hang a right here. We're going to go on over into Tiger Lake. And that's, let's see, Tiger Lake, is that the kind of round one or is it the one a little bit below there? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, you just follow a little windy creek, and it's just a little round lake back there.
There's a couple of lakes. Yeah, there's Lake Rosali.
Russo or Rusali or something.
Tiger Lake's the one a little south of there.
Actually, Rosalie.
Rosalie.
Yeah.
All right. Well, looking at Tiger Lake. What do you got? So you got more reed edges, looks like. You got a little water between there and the actual bank again. Got like a little cove when you come in. You bear right. There's like a little cove up here.
Just a few docks.
A couple of docks.
Mm-hmm.
I like this little cove. It's just a small cove. But as soon as you come in and you hang a right, what do you think about that little spot?
Go into the right, yeah. And actually, if you just go in and go straight across the lake, that's typically where I've had the most success in that lake.
Is that a boat ramp over there, a little marina or something?
I'm not sure exactly what it is because I've always gone there by boat. You know what I mean?
There's like a little, which you can't see the aerial map that we got pulled up, but basically there's a little creek over there that dumps out on the northwest corner, and right below that there's like a little bay or whatever with looks like riprap and maybe a dock or two in it, and maybe actually a residence. Looks like it's got a swimming pool. But anyway, again, these little places between the pads and the bank and the reed clumps and the bank and all, that's where you'll see these spawners. Yeah, absolutely. And again, Tiger's, one of those places that you're not going to camp out for 4 days. It's going to be, maybe that somebody in practice went up there, marked, a handful on the beds and went in there and had a banner day, but it most likely would be best not to return. So, that being said, say you spend a little bit of your practice in one of these fisheries, one of these 3 smaller lakes here, Cypress, Hatch and Haw, or Tiger, and you find that day 1 bag, that's magical 25, 30-pound bag. The experienced angler with Florida fishing would bail, right? In theory. I mean, it's hard to do, but at least pretty quickly after day 2 morning, if you're not catching them, bail and then either stay in Toho to start with and try to catch you 15 pounds or something like that, or get on something. You can catch a big bag up there too. But what I'm getting at is, say you do good in one of these lakes, would you go and stay in Toho for a little while or run straight to Kissimmee instead of trying to focus on duplicating in one of these lakes?
Yeah, a lot of that it'd be a few factors. One is what is the boat draw? Because you've got, if you can get straight through the lock,
yeah,
for me, if I can get through the lock in the first 2 cycles, I'm gone.
yeah.
If you've got a later boat draw, then absolutely spend some time on Toho. Of those 3, Hatch and Hall, Cypress, and Tiger, Cypress to me would be the one that if it's on, I would return.
You can duplicate.
That can be a couple days worth of stuff.
That's cool. That's good. So moving on to Kissimmee. And this is kind of the crown jewel of the chain. And what's amazing to me is almost every big tournament comes out of Toho. All those fish are brought back up above a lock. And somehow Kissimmee always still produces winning bags. I have no idea how that happens. It seems like every big fish in the last 40 years should be swimming around Toho. But somehow nature, all these big fish still pop up at Kissimmee. So not even trying to explain how that happens, but going into Kissimmee, all right, so I know where you won. And I know you fished in there again in the open I covered a few years ago. But I remember, and I'm going to kind of zoom in on the general area here, I remember when I went back to cover that second open, you were not impressed with that area. And they have these monster mulchers and stuff that go through and like eat up all the mats and everything. What have you been? Did you fish that? No, the open was on Harris this year. Have you been to Toho? I mean, Kissimmee recently?
Last time I was there would have been like November, probably.
Is that area setting up good again, or is that area kind of?
No, I mean that area of the lake is typically where it goes down first. In the spawn cycle, it's fairly well protected from wind. And it's good just about every year. And if you go back in history and look at the major tournaments that have been on this chain, there is a lot of wins that the people came from there. And the first one I remember is Takahiro, probably 14 years ago, throwing a rattle trap down the boat lanes, all up and down that area, and he won. The one ChatterBait tournament when it first came out, I think his name was Height. Is that?
I think B Heights. I think the first name is B. No, yeah. It's Brett. B. Brett.
He was in that same area throwing a ChatterBait and destroyed the field.
Yeah.
I've got a win in there, and that's sort of the area you could say JT Kenny wrecked them 2 years ago or something in March on some of those pads.
So looking at that and thinking about the fact that that's one of the places they first spawn, and we're talking about probably the first big wave happening this week, what do you look for in there? Do you go straight to that North Shore? It seems like when I was with you that day, I don't remember exactly, but it seems like we went to that North Shore and fished back down kind of the West Shore, back towards that lane that comes through from Kissimmee. But is that Northwest area kind of? Yeah,
well, when we were together that day, I just happened to have a few stretches of mats that there was keeper fish, we'll call them, that were all stacked up in there. But the bigger fish that I all caught were always on that northeastern side. That part of the lake kind of tilts like this. So it'll kind of throw you off a little bit. But that hole from the northern side all the way down that bank, all the way to the boat ramp at Overstreet.
Right. And that's where I saw you fishing more in that second open, I believe, was down towards.
And McMillan was right down the road from me, because if I recall, we kind of laughed about it because I didn't have a great day one. You pulled in and you said, hey, I don't mean to be rude, but do you know where the leaders are?
Yeah, that's sorry.
And I said, well, hold on, because I was throwing the old devil horse.
Yeah.
Said, well, hey, if you want a good picture, just hang on, I'm getting ready to catch one. And I caught a big one that you snapped some photos on, and then I sent you down to where McMillan was.
And he didn't catch anything. That was quite fortuitous for both of us. I pulled up trying to be a jerk to one of my buddies, and then you showed out for me. So basically, like, I wish I could just highlight something on this app, just highlight this whole bank. But basically, once you go into that long cove, the whole right side is good stuff, right?
Yes. Oh, for sure.
All right. So your guess, I'm guessing for you, but your guess on where it's going to be won is that bay.
Either down there or down by Jack's.
Now, Jack's. I'm not real familiar with Kissimmee. The only times I've ever really fished in there much, I stayed on the north end. Jack's is down here around the south end.
Yes, if you just followed that bank all the way down. I forget what the point is that comes out from Overstreet. Like if you put in an Overstreet and ran towards the middle of the lake.
Yeah, it kind of curls back up.
And then it curls back around. That's underneath there is 27 Palms.
Yeah.
That's a tremendous, tremendous place. I've always known the Lane brothers love to fish there. And there's been a lot of tournaments won there. And then you can work all the way down that bank to where Jack's Slough is, where the little creek from Lake Jackson spills in.
Looking at that I believe this is the 27 Palms area. It's kind of to the right of those two islands out in front of Overstreets, right? You kind of go and you go between those. Yeah, so that area, one of the things that sticks out right away about that area versus even that shore you're talking about up there is that vegetation comes out a good bit further and you end up with these bigger little holes and openings that are going to be protected and clear, hypothetically. The only thing about that is the wind is blowing out of the west right now, but you do have a little protection from these islands.
From the islands, and the vegetation starts, you just got a lot of vegetation, and you can work all the way back inshore. And so, you'll go 50, 75 yards into the vegetation, and the water will change colors, and all of a sudden you're just in beauty.
Yeah, it's amazing how it filters it. It's like a huge filter when you got that hydrilla and eelgrass in it. And you can actually see, I'm kind of zoomed in on a boat. This may be you sitting here on a bag. But there's a boat kind of in one of those openings. So you can kind of get a reference here of how big these openings are. Because that boat, that opening there is probably 30 or 40 times as big as a bass boat. And that's a small opening compared to these others up above it. So these are really like big ponds kind of over in the vegetation.
Absolutely. And the thing I love about Florida fishing is, the grass is different every year. The area's general vicinities might be the same, but the same spots typically don't happen over and over because it changes. And I've known guys that catch giant stringers in there, directly on the pad fields. And then, I've gone there and on a benefit tournament once with a speed worm and just kind of big open pockets with eelgrass and just power pulled down and never cranked again and just cast after cast, and you're catching giant females. It's just incredible.
That's what we're looking at too. These fish are just going to keep coming to these places throughout this whole tournament. The moon is going to have them there. Some guys are going to have the best practice of their life too, with the moon being tomorrow, and they're going to be it's going to be pitiful. Like I can't imagine how excited I would be if I went down there and got on one of these spots where you can see these 30, 35-pound bags on bed. But tell the people how nauseating it is when you find that on Tuesday and you go back day one on Thursday and there's not a fish in sight.
Well, it certainly happens. And, it's going to take a lot of restraint for these guys, especially some of the northern guys that may not get a chance to do this all that often. It's like it's Monday and it's like you see this fish, you're like, fish going to be there Thursday. Yeah. I need something for social media. Yeah. Holding the big old fish.
It's amazing how quick they vacate these areas. And the good thing about the weather setting up, there should be more coming. But a 20-pound bag replacing a 35-pound bag is still nauseating. Like when you have these, and those big ones, for some reason, the big ones seem to spawn first. I don't know if they're older and smarter or what, but they always seem to be the first group to come. So, but somebody's going to get on those jokers on Thursday. Somebody's going to have one of those big groups of big first-round females, aggressive, haven't been fished for, and they're going to just smoke it.
If there's not a 28-pound plus or heck 30, if there's not a 30-pound bag, I will be shocked.
Dirty 30.
Shocked. Might be a couple of them.
Yeah, so that's a little look at Kissimmee, and what you see there on the pattern kind of developing is that basically that whole eastern shore is money. And now to look at a couple of other places, it seems like down around this big island, there's always a player kind of in this canal behind the side. What's the name of that island?
Brahma?
Yeah, down when you go back behind there, it's a real protected area again. It seems like that. Yep. Maybe Rockamora fishes down there a lot. Seems like he's a hammer on that chain. So you'll probably see.
It's a good part because that stretch you're talking about on that west side is very protected.
Yeah.
From all winds.
Yeah, I mean it's basically it's guarded from every direction, even where it opens up, it narrows down and then opens back up inside it. Yep. You know, if you had it straight out of the north wind, it's still not going to hit it that hard.
Mm-hmm.
So moving up this western shore here, it seems like the last tournament I worked down there was probably an open. And there were a lot of guys who were catching solid average bags down through there. A lot of like 15 to 17 pound bags. Is that kind of a typical thing? You know, a lot of checks will get made through here?
For that time of year, yeah. And then later in the spawn, the bigger fit, you'll see the bigger bags coming out of there.
The only other place.
A lot of the times, the world sees Florida in January and February.
Yeah.
Because that's, the tournament, all organizations kick off down here, and rightly so. But, that's not the best time to fish Florida.
Yeah.
But it is a time to catch the really, really big ones.
It's the best time to fish it when everything else in the country is frozen.
It's frozen.
Yeah. It's hard to pass it up then. So this little pocket up in the top, in the northwest corner, I can't remember the name of it, but I think I saw Chris Lane fishing there a good bit a few years ago.
That's a really good place. It's the mouth of Tiger Creek.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's like a state park up there, but that whole little section it can be very good as well. It's a pad field out in front of it. There's some protected cove areas. It did not. Last year was the first year that I'm not out there all the time, but that's one of the places that I go to, and that was the first year I never really timed it on a good day for that area. But in years past, it's been fabulous. And if I recall, I think they sprayed heavy up there. There was a bunch of hyacinth mats and hydrilla, and the way they kind of do things now, every piece of grass becomes collateral damage, and it kind of washed away and got dirty.
You kind of get back into another one of these deals where kind of like that, what you call it, 7 palms?
Yep.
You have vegetation come out further, right above that little cove,
mm-hmm.
and kind of create these little pockets again.
Yep.
And that's going to be another place where you get in there with that speed worm and moving baits and sight fish too. And mm-hmm. then right above there, it looks like there's a good bit of reed clumps for that big jig.
Yep. If you go from Overstreet all the way up that eastern side to the north end of North Cove, there'll be isolated pads, clumps and clump fields all the way up and down that bank. And you can, do that speed worm deal, or you just get up and flip it. I had grabbed one other bait, and, we do a lot of this a Gambler, black and blue tail, 5-inch ace. So, we just put that on with a little bit of weight, and you just pitch at those pad clumps and pause 2 or 3 seconds, and they'll pick it up pretty quick. That's a great way to fish pads. And, a lot of times, I'm not the world's best sight fisherman by any means, but, when they're coming, I know they're going to the pad, so you stay away from it and, pitch to them. And that's kind of how JT Kenny just had that incredible bag a few years ago. And then it's funny because you saw JT Kenny doing that. And the other gentleman, I can't remember his name, maybe Stacy King, he had like a 29-pound bag too. And he was doing the same thing, but he was casting to those similar type clumps, from 30, 40 feet away. So it's just interesting to see the two different styles. You got the guys that just want to make a short flip. You got the guys that'll cast, but it accomplishes the same thing.
I fished what was just about my final open on the Kissimmee Chain. I think I might have fished one more after that, but I got there and I had a boat started getting a few years on it, and it doesn't take long for stuff to start tearing up when you ride them as hard and use them as much as we do. But I ran all the way to Kissimmee, and there's a little area between the canal where it pops into Kissimmee, and then that little canal that goes over into that big cove and kind of cuts off a huge island. And that little area had a ton of pads back then, more so than in this satellite image, and there was some mats washed in. And I had a few bites in there, so I went and I sat down right there on the first day, and my boat wouldn't crank. And it turned out I had blown a power head. But that little area right there, in years past, has been just loaded with lily pads that catch a bunch of hyacinth and make these mats and stuff. Is that not the case now? Is some of that kind of blown out or been sprayed? Or
Well, if there's a piece of hyacinth on that lake, it's been sprayed. So that's step one. But when we had the hurricanes, that actually dislodged a lot of stuff. It's been kind of funny because we have these mud mats, is what we call them, but or mud tussock.
Yeah.
If you watched MLF, you
yeah.
heard JT and them laughing about it. But they get uprooted and then they start floating around the lake.
Yeah.
And so you'll be out in the middle of Kissimmee and you see this little island and you're like, I don't remember that.
Yeah.
It'll blow to that bank and then it'll blow to the other side. And it had the pig trail closed for a while.
That's that little trail that goes through right here.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to start. We got big grassy and little grassy. We're going to have to start having big mud and little mud island. When some of them get kind of grouped up. Well, that's giving them a pretty good idea of, we got a lot of pattern points here between those 5 fisheries. What I want you to do now is go out on a limb here and predict who do you think is going to win and how much do you think it's going to take? Century mark. Are we going to hit the century mark?
I should have known you were going to ask this, and I didn't even think about it. The easy pick is just, that Thrift will win it because he wears his hat and he's a good guy and a great fisherman. But this is, Florida's probably his Achilles heel if there is one. I mean, he's won a Okeechobee event with the ChatterBait back in the day. And he's an incredible fisherman. But the guy that immediately comes to mind for me is John Cox.
Yeah.
He is a sight fishing fool. He is a very good angler. He knows this place. I'd have to say Cox is probably one of the favorites. And gosh, what is it, 4-day event?
Yeah. Let's go ahead and say it. It's going to be over 100 pounds. Just say it.
Yeah, I want to, but it's hard to do that. It's hard to do that anywhere, but on this chain with the amount of pressure. Let's see.
You act like there was just 80 really good fishermen out there beating up on them all week.
Yeah. I'm going to say like 90.
90.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's strong. I'm going to say 89 and a half.
$1. Is it if you go over, do you bust?
No, you can have over. I hope you're right. I want to see a Century Mark tournament early this year. And the St. John's. We're about to do one of those predicting patterns with Justin Lucas, and the St. John's may very well be that because they've got the same weather this week too.
Yep.
And that's going to be.
Is it the same week? Is it this week?
Yeah, it starts Thursday also.
Yeah, and if I recall, Justin, he's a great guy, but I remember him fishing on a St. John's and him having this epic battle with this. He swears it's the strongest fish he's ever, fought, and he caught like a 9-pounder. It was awesome.
Yeah. So, I think he finished, last time they fished there, he finished in the top 10. So, it'd be interesting to see what his breakdown is for that fishery. But that gives us a good bit to look at here for Kissimmee Chain. I appreciate your time. And I'm going to wrap it up, and I'll talk to you later, brother.
All right, man. Y'all enjoy the tournament. See you.
I bet. So that's it. Predicting patterns. Lake Toho, FLW Tour, Kissimmee Chain. Yep. Toho, Cypress, Hatch and Haw, Tiger, and Kissimmee. We'll see what they do. It's going to be some big weights. A lot of fun to watch. Check it out. See you guys later.